Northwood High's bullies messed with the wrong girl. Her revenge was explosive. Hannah Ellis was a ghost by design. At 16, she had mastered the art of inconsequence, a necessary survival skill for the perpetually overlooked. Her mother's military career had dictated a transient lifestyle, moving from base to base, school to school, leaving Hannah to perfect the delicate craft of blending into backgrounds. Northwood High was just the latest station in a long, solitary journey. She was neither ugly nor beautiful, a quiet girl with shoulder length, brown hair and a frame that suggested she might disappear if she turned sideways. Her clothes were deliberately unremarkable, muted gray hoodies, well-worn jeans, and canvas sneakers that made no sound against the polished hallway floors. She spoke only when spoken to, kept her eyes fixed on textbooks or the scuffed linoleum beneath her feet, and moved through the crowded corridors with the silent efficiency of a shadow. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. This curated invisibility was her armor, forged through years of being the new kid, the outsider, the one who never quite belonged. At Northwood, however, her armor had begun to crack. The problem wasn't a single flaw in her system, but a trio of them. Walking, talking engines of casual cruelty who had somehow detected her presence despite her best efforts to remain unseen. Samantha Price was the undisputed queen of Northwood's sophomore class, a vision of carefully constructed perfection. Her blonde hair was always flawlessly styled, her makeup applied with professional precision, and her clothing looked as if it had been lifted from the pages of a teen fashion magazine. But beneath the glossy exterior lay a chasm of insecurity that she filled by systematically tearing others down. Her lieutenant was Megan Harris, a willing accomplice who amplified Samantha's every slight and insult. Megan craved the validation that came with proximity to power, even if it meant sacrificing her own moral compass. She was the kind of girl who laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny and agreed too quickly with opinions she didn't share. Then there was Tyler Mitchell, a lanky athlete who orbited Samantha like a satellite, using his physical presence to intimidate anyone she targeted. His letterman jacket was his uniform, his smirk his weapon of choice. Their chosen victim was Hannah. Her quietness wasn't seen as a shield, but as an invitation. Her solitude wasn't a choice, but a weakness to be exploited. They had somehow intuited that she was different, that beneath her carefully constructed facade lay something worth breaking. Bullying started small, as it always does. A snicker as she passed in the hallway. A deliberately loud whisper about the weird new girl. A shoulder check that sent her books scattering across the floor. Hannah, true to her training, absorbed it all. She would gather her belongings, her face a neutral mask, and continue on her way. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Hannah's father had been more than just another military spouse. Before his death 3 years ago, Colonel James Ellis had been a decorated Special Forces operative with expertise in hand-to-hand combat. He had begun training his daughter from the age of 7, not out of paranoia, but out of love. "Control is everything, Hannah," he would say during their sessions in their garage-turned-dojo. "Emotion is a wildfire, chaotic, unpredictable, destructive. But discipline is a precision instrument. You apply the right amount of force at the exact right moment, and you can neutralize any threat without becoming the monster yourself." So Hannah endured. She cataloged each insult, each shove, each moment of humiliation not as wounds, but as intelligence. She was studying them, learning their patterns, understanding their weaknesses. They thought they were breaking her down. They were only teaching her the structural vulnerabilities of their own foundations. In the back of her advanced biology class, Emily Summers watched it all with growing unease. Emily had been where Hannah was now, isolated, targeted, afraid. But she had found her voice, and more importantly, she had found her courage. She recognized something in Hannah that others missed. the coiled tension of someone who was choosing not to fight, rather than someone who COULDN single quotes D. Mr. Dorian Hayes. Their English teacher had noticed it too. During class discussions, when Hannah occasionally spoke, her words carried a weight that belied her quiet demeanor. There was an intelligence there, a depth that suggested still waters running far deeper than anyone suspected. But for now, Hannah remained committed to her strategy of invisibility, even as it became increasingly clear that she had been seen. The cafeteria became their primary theater of cruelty. It was there, 3 weeks into the semester, that the invisible line was first crossed. Hannah was navigating toward an empty corner table, her lunch tray balanced carefully in her hands, when Tyler's foot suddenly appeared in her path. It was a classic unimaginative trip, the kind of juvenile prank that belonged in middle school, not high school. She went down hard, her tray clattering to the floor in a cascade of plastic and spilled food. Chocolate milk spread across the linoleum like spilled paint, and the scattered remains of her sandwich drew snickers from nearby tables. "Watch where you're going, ghost girl," Samantha called out, her voice carrying the false sweetness of artificial honey. The nickname was new, and it stuck to Hannah like a brand. Hannah's cheeks burned with a heat that had nothing to do with the fluorescent lights overhead. The wildfire her father had warned her about licked at the edges of her control. She wanted to spring up, to use the basic defensive techniques he had taught her to wipe the smirk off Tyler's face. But she could hear his voice in her mind, calm and steady. Control is a precision instrument. She pushed herself up slowly, deliberately ignoring the mess at her feet, and walked away without a word. Behind her, laughter followed like a wake of cruelty. The escalation was methodical. They began intercepting her between classes, forming a triangle of intimidation by her locker. Samantha would stand directly in front of her, close enough that Hannah could smell her expensive perfume, while Tyler and Megan flanked her on either side. "Did you hear about the new girl?" Samantha would say, her voice pitched just loud enough for passing students to hear. "I heard she talks to herself. I heard she keeps dead animals in her locker. I heard she's never had a friend in her entire life." Each lie was a small, sharp stone thrown at Hannah's carefully constructed walls. She absorbed them all, her face maintaining its neutral expression while internally mapping the architecture of their cruelty. Samantha's vanity was her load-bearing beam. Tyler's aggression was all performance. Megan had no identity beyond her role as a sycophant. She was beginning to understand their structure, and more importantly, she was beginning to formulate a plan for its demolition. The physical harassment intensified. Tyler would accidentally bump into her in the hallways, his shoulder checking hers with enough force to send her stumbling. Megan would knock her books from her hands, then apologize with exaggerated concern while smirking at Samantha. During gym class, when teams were being selected, Hannah was always chosen last when she was chosen at all. More often, she was simply assigned to whichever team was short a player, a human afterthought in a game she had never wanted to play. It was during one such class that Emily Summers finally approached her. They were sitting on the bleachers, both benched for different reasons, Emily for a sprained ankle, Hannah for being systematically excluded from participation. "You know," Emily said quietly, "you don't have to take this." Hannah looked at her, surprised by the directness of the statement. "Take what?" "The bullying. The way they treat you. You're tougher than you let on." Hannah felt a flutter of panic. Could Emily see through her carefully maintained facade? "I don't know what you mean." "I mean," Emily continued, "that most people would have broken by now. Or transferred schools. Or at least cried, but you just absorb it. Like you're waiting for something." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Hannah was waiting for the right moment, the right pressure, the right opportunity to apply her father's lessons with surgical precision. "Sometimes," Hannah said carefully, "the best defense is not to engage." Emily nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Just remember," she said, "there's a difference between choosing not to fight and not being able to fight." The words haunted Hannah for the rest of the day. That afternoon, as she walked home through the quiet suburban streets, she found herself thinking about the distinction Emily had drawn. Was she choosing not to fight, or had she simply convinced herself that avoidance was the same as control? Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, Hannah. But it's the tempering that makes it unbreakable." She was being tempered, she realized. Each day, each insult, each moment of humiliation was adding another layer to her resolve. The question was no longer whether she would fight back, but when. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The breaking point came on a gray Tuesday afternoon that smelled of rain and regret. Hannah was taking her usual route to the library, cutting through the courtyard behind the gymnasium where the popular kids rarely ventured. It was her sanctuary, a pocket of quiet in the chaos of high school social warfare. She was almost through when they materialized from behind the equipment, shed-like predators emerging from tall grass. Samantha, Tyler, and Megan, their faces wearing expressions of bored malice that Hannah had learned to recognize as particularly dangerous. "Going somewhere, ghost girl?" Samantha asked, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Hannah tried to sidestep them, but Tyler moved to block her path. "Samantha asked you a question," he said, his voice lower than usual, more threatening. There was something different in the air today, a sharper quality to their usual cruelty. Hannah's instincts, honed by years of her father's training, began to whisper warnings. "You know," Samantha continued, walking in a slow circle around Hannah, "I've been thinking about you, about what your deal is. Most people, when they get pushed, they push back, or they cry, or they run away. But you just stand there, like you're not even human." Hannah remained silent, but every muscle in her body was coiled, ready. "Maybe," Samantha said, stopping directly in front of her, "you need a bigger push." That's when Hannah saw Tyler pick up a piece of broken concrete from the ground. The chunk was roughly the size of a tennis ball, its edges sharp and unforgiving. Megan, following his lead, found a similar projectile. "Let's see if Ghost Girl can feel pain," Samantha said, her own fingers closing around a jagged piece of asphalt. The first stone, thrown by Tyler, struck Hannah squarely between the shoulder blades. The impact was shocking, not just for its physical force, but for what it represented. Fundamental escalation beyond words, and shoves into something that could cause real harm. Hannah stumbled forward, her breath catching in her throat. The pain was sharp and immediate, radiating outward from the point of impact like ripples in a pond. "Oops," Tyler said, grinning. "Butterfingers." The second stone, launched by Megan, caught Hannah on the upper arm. This one was smaller but thrown with surprising accuracy. Hannah felt something warm begin to trickle down her arm, blood from where the concrete had scraped away skin. "Your turn, Sam," Megan said, her voice bright with excitement. Samantha's throw was the most vicious. She hurled her chunk of asphalt not at Hannah's back or arms, but directly at her face. Hannah managed to duck, but the stone clipped her temple, sending stars exploding across her vision. That was the moment. The precise instant when the careful architecture of Hannah's control began to crumble. All the training, all the discipline, all the careful containment of her father's lessons, it all condensed into a single, crystalline moment of absolute clarity. She straightened slowly, her hand rising to touch the cut on her temple. When she looked at her fingers, they came away red. "Oh, look," Samantha said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Ghost Girl can bleed. How wonderfully human of you." Hannah looked up at her tormentors, and for the first time in months, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "You know what?" she said, her voice carrying a calm that seemed to suck the air from the courtyard. "I think I'm done being a ghost." Tyler, perhaps sensing the shift in atmosphere, picked up another stone. "Yeah? What are you going to do about it, freak?" Hannah's smile widened, and something cold and dangerous flickered in her eyes. "I'm going to show you what happens when you corner something that was never as helpless as you thought." Tyler's second throw never found its target. Hannah moved like water, fluid and precise, her body flowing into the defensive stance her father had drilled into her 10,000 times. The stone passed harmlessly through the space where her head had been, and suddenly she was inside Tyler's reach, her hand closing around his wrist with a grip that made him yelp in surprise. "What the—" he began, but Hannah was already moving, using his own momentum against him. She stepped behind his extended arm, applied pressure to his elbow joint, and Tyler went down hard, his knees hitting the concrete with a sound like breaking. "Kindling, Jesus Christ!" Megan shrieked, stumbling backward. "What is she doing?" Hannah released Tyler's wrist and stepped back, her posture relaxed but ready. Tyler rolled on the ground, clutching his arm and whimpering. "I didn't break anything," Hannah said calmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who knew exactly how much force she had applied. "But if you try to throw anything else at me, I will." Samantha stared at her in shock, the chunk of asphalt still clutched in her hand. You can't just ... "I can," Hannah interrupted, her voice cutting through Samantha's protest like a blade. "I've been able to for years. I chose not to, but you just made that choice for me." Tyler struggled to his feet, his face flushed with pain and humiliation. "You psycho freak, you can't just attack people." Hannah's laugh was soft and utterly without humor. "Attack? You threw rocks at me. I defended myself. There's a difference, though I suppose someone with your limited intelligence might not understand it." "You're going to get expelled," Samantha said, her voice shaking with rage. "I'll tell everyone you attacked us for no reason. Will you?" Hannah asked, tilting her head slightly. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like 3 people cornered one person in an isolated area and started throwing rocks. I wonder what the security cameras might show." She gestured toward the corner of the gymnasium, where a security camera was mounted discreetly under the eaves. Samantha's face went pale as she realized that their private assault had been anything but. "You think you're so smart," Samantha hissed, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "I think I'm tired of being your entertainment," Hannah replied. "And I think you're going to leave me alone from now on." "Or what?" Tyler demanded, though he was still cradling his arm. Hannah's smile returned, and this time it was genuinely terrifying. "Or I'll stop choosing not to fight back, and Tyler?" She looked directly at him. "Next time I won't be so gentle." Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving the 3 of them standing in the courtyard like the ruins of their own kingdom. Behind her, she heard Megan's shaky voice. "Sam, what the hell just happened?" Hannah didn't turn around to hear Samantha's response. She had more important things to think about, like how good it felt to finally stop pretending to be powerless. Her transformation was immediate and electric. By the next morning, the story had spread through Northwood's social ecosystem like wildfire, though the details had been twisted and embellished with each telling. Hannah Ellis, Ghost Girl. The invisible nobody had apparently destroyed Tyler. Mitchell in some kind of ninja attack. The security footage, which the administration had quietly reviewed and filed away, showed a clear case of self-defense, but the student body was less interested in legalities than in the sheer impossibility of what they had witnessed. Hannah found herself the subject of whispered conversations and sideways glances. But for the first time, the attention wasn't entirely negative. There was a new element present: respect, tinged with a healthy dose of fear. "Holy shit," she heard a sophomore boy whisper to his friend as she passed their lockers. "Did you see what she did to Tyler? Dude's got his arm in a sling." I heard she knows like 7 different martial arts, his friend replied. I heard she could kill someone with her bare hands. Hannah allowed herself a small smile. The rumors were ridiculous, but they served her purposes. Fear was a more effective armor than invisibility had ever been. Emily Summers was waiting by her locker when Hannah arrived for first period. So, Emily said without preamble, you want to tell me what really happened yesterday? Hannah considered her response carefully. They threw rocks at me. I made them stop. That's not what I meant. And you know it. Emily's voice was gentle but insistent. I meant, where did you learn to do that? Because what Tyler described to everyone who'd listen doesn't sound like something you just figured out on the spot. Hannah looked at her for a long moment, then made a decision that would have been impossible just 24 hours earlier. My father taught me, before he died. Your father? Special forces. He wanted to make sure I could protect myself. Hannah's voice carried a weight that made Emily nod in understanding. And you've been hiding it this whole time? I wasn't hiding. I was choosing not to use it. There's a difference. Emily grinned. Yeah, I can see that. So what changed? Hannah touched the small bandage on her temple where Samantha's stone had cut her. They crossed a line. They made the choice for me. Across the hallway, Samantha Price was having her own difficult morning. Her usual circle of admirers had contracted noticeably, and she could feel the shift in the school's social atmosphere like a physical weight. Maybe we should just leave her alone, Megan suggested for the 3rd time that morning. I mean, if she can do that to Tyler ... She got lucky, Samantha snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. Tyler wasn't ready for her. She sucker punched him. That's not what it looked like on the video, another girl said quietly. It looked like she knew exactly what she was doing. Samantha's jaw tightened. The video was the worst part. The administration had been annoyingly fair in their assessment, concluding that Hannah had acted in self-defense against 3 attackers. No punishment, no suspension, no consequences for the girl who had just upended the entire social order. She thinks she's won, Samantha said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She thinks she can just ... change everything. Maybe she has, Megan said, and the admission hung in the air like a confession. Tyler was having his own crisis. His arm wasn't seriously injured, just bruised and strained, but his pride was shattered. He had been humiliated by a girl who looked like she weighed about as much as his gym bag, and the entire school knew it. It's not over, he told himself as he struggled to open his locker with one hand. She thinks she's tough now, but she's still just a freak. But even as he said it, he could feel the lie in the words. There had been something in Hannah's eyes during those final moments in the courtyard, something that suggested she had been holding back far more than she had revealed. Mr. Hayes had observed the entire social earthquake with the bemused interest of someone who had seen this particular drama play out many times before. During English class, he noticed how Hannah sat differently now, straighter, more present. She no longer stared at her desk but looked up, made eye contact, participated in discussions with a confidence that seemed to have materialized overnight. Miss Ellis, he said as the class filed out. A word? Hannah approached his desk, her expression neutral but alert. I heard there was some excitement yesterday, he said carefully. Some people learned that actions have consequences, Hannah replied, her voice steady. Mr. Hayes nodded slowly. Indeed, and I hope you've learned that. Sometimes the most powerful response to aggression is a proportionate defense. I did exactly what I needed to do. Nothing more, nothing less. I believe you did. He paused, then added, but power, Miss Ellis, is not just about the ability to defend yourself. It's about knowing when and how to use that ability. The truly strong don't need to prove their strength. Hannah considered this, then nodded. I understand. I hope you do, Mr. Hayes said, because I suspect your situation is far from resolved. He was right. As Hannah walked to her next class, she could feel the weight of Samantha's stare from across the hallway. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over, and for the first time in months, Hannah found herself looking forward to whatever came next. The reckoning came exactly 1 week later, and it came with the calculated precision of a surgical strike. Samantha had spent the intervening days watching her carefully constructed kingdom crumble. Students who had once hung on her every word now questioned her authority. Teachers who had tolerated her subtle manipulations began calling her out on her behavior. Most humiliating of all, the story of Hannah's defense had evolved into a legend. That made Samantha and her friends look like incompetent bullies who had picked on the wrong target. She couldn't let it stand. More importantly, she couldn't let Hannah Ellis continue to exist in her school as a living reminder of her failure. "We need to finish this," she told Tyler and Megan during lunch, her voice carrying the desperate edge of someone whose identity was dissolving. "Sam, maybe we should just," Megan began, but Samantha cut her off with a look that could have frozen. "Blood. No. She made us look like fools. She made me look weak. I won't have that." Tyler, his arms still tender from their last encounter, shifted uncomfortably. "She clearly knows how to fight. Maybe we should." "She got lucky," Samantha snapped. "One move doesn't make her Bruce Lee. Besides, I have a plan." The plan was simple in its cruelty. Samantha would provoke Hannah publicly, in front of as many students as possible. She would push and push until Hannah either backed down, restoring Samantha's dominance, or fought back, at which point Samantha would claim victim status and have Hannah expelled for assault. It was foolproof, she told herself. Either way, Hannah Ellis would be gone. The confrontation was staged for maximum audience impact. Friday afternoon, just after the final bell, when the hallways were packed with students heading to their cars and buses, Samantha positioned herself directly in Hannah's path, blocking the exit with Tyler and Megan flanking her. "Well, well," Samantha said, her voice carrying clearly through the crowded hallway. "If it isn't our resident psychopath." Hannah stopped walking, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression calm. Around them, students began to slow their exodus, sensing drama. "Samantha," Hannah said evenly, "I thought we had an understanding." "Oh, we do," Samantha replied, stepping closer. "I understand that you're a freak who attacks people. And I understand that I'm not going to let you terrorize this school anymore." A murmur ran through the gathering crowd. Hannah could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, phones being raised to capture whatever was about to happen. "I've never terrorized anyone," Hannah said, her voice carrying the dangerous quietness. "I defended myself against 3 people who were throwing rocks at me. There's a difference, is there?" Samantha stepped even closer, now well within Hannah's personal space. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a ticking time bomb. How long before you snap again? How long before you really hurt someone?" Hannah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I suggest you step back, Samantha. Or what?" Samantha's voice rose to a pitch that ensured everyone in the hallway could hear. "You'll attack me too? You'll assault another student?" "I'll defend myself if I have to." "See?" Samantha whirled around to address the crowd. "She's threatening me." You all heard it, but the crowd's reaction wasn't what Samantha had expected. Instead of shock or support, she saw skepticism on most faces. These students had lived with her reign of terror for years. They had seen her casual cruelty, her systematic destruction of anyone who didn't fit into her narrow definition of acceptable. "Sam," Megan whispered urgently, "maybe we should—" "Shut up," Samantha hissed, then turned back to Hannah. "You think you're so tough now? You think one lucky shot makes you some kind of warrior?" Hannah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. The subtle relaxation of someone who had made a decision. "I think," she said clearly, "that you're scared. I think you've built your entire identity around making other people feel small. And now you don't know who you are without that power. The words hit Samantha like a physical blow. You don't know anything about me. I know that you're standing here in front of all these people, trying to provoke me into a fight because you can't stand the idea that someone stood up to you. I know that you're so desperate to maintain your illusion of control that you're willing to risk getting hurt just to try to drag me back down to your level. Samantha's face flushed red. You arrogant bitch. You think you're better than me? I think, Hannah said, her voice carrying a finality that made the hallway go silent, that I'm done with this conversation. She started to walk around Samantha, but Samantha grabbed her arm. Don't you dare walk away from me. That was the moment. The precise instant when Hannah's careful control met the immovable force of Samantha's desperation. Hannah looked down at Samantha's hand on her arm, then back, up at Samantha's face. Let go, make me. Hannah's movement was so smooth, so economical, that most of the watching students missed it entirely. One moment Samantha was gripping Hannah's arm, the next she was on the ground, her wrist twisted at an angle that suggested she should be in considerable pain. I asked you to let go, Hannah said, her voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. Samantha stared up at her in shock, her carefully applied makeup smeared, her perfect hair disheveled. You can single quotes T. I can, Hannah replied. I have been able to for years. The only reason you're not seriously hurt right now is because I chose not to hurt you. She released Samantha's wrist and stepped back. This is over, Samantha. Find someone else to torment, because I'm done being your target. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Hannah walked away, leaving Samantha sitting on the floor like the wreckage of her own kingdom. The video was online within an hour. Multiple students had captured the confrontation from different angles. And the footage told a clear story. Samantha Price, the school's most notorious bully, had physically grabbed Hannah Ellis and threatened her. Hannah had responded with minimal force, using what appeared to be a basic self-defense technique to free herself. By Monday morning, the video had been viewed thousands of times. The comment section was a battlefield of opinions, but the majority seemed to support Hannah's actions. Finally, someone stood up to that psycho. About time someone put Samantha in her place. That girl Hannah has nerves of steel. Samantha's social media accounts, once flooded with admiring comments and friend requests, became wastelands of criticism and ridicule. Students who had once feared her now felt emboldened to share their own stories of her cruelty. The administration, faced with overwhelming evidence and public pressure, finally took action. Samantha was suspended for a week and placed on probation. Tyler and Megan received warnings and mandatory counseling sessions. Hannah, meanwhile, found herself navigating an entirely new social landscape. Students who had never spoken to her before now nodded respectfully in the hallways. Teachers who had barely noticed her existence began acknowledging her contributions in class. You know, Emily said as they sat together at lunch, Hannah's first time eating in the cafeteria since the rock-throwing incident. I think you've fundamentally changed this place. Hannah looked around the cafeteria, noting the absence of Samantha's usual table of sycophants. I just wanted to be left alone. Maybe, Emily replied, but you've shown everyone that bullies aren't untouchable. That's going to have consequences. Way beyond just you and Samantha. She was right. Rachel Simmons, who had watched the hallway confrontation with growing amazement, had started speaking up in her classes. She publicly contradicted a teacher who made a dismissive comment about students who couldn't handle a little teasing. There's a difference between teasing and systematic harassment, she had said, her voice shaking but determined. And maybe it's time adults started recognizing that difference. Other students began following suit. The culture of casual cruelty that had defined Northwood for years was beginning to crack. Tyler, meanwhile, was struggling with his own reckoning. His arm had healed, but his confidence remained shattered. He found himself questioning behaviors he had never examined before, wondering when he had become the kind of person who threw rocks at someone who had never done anything to him. "I don't get it," he confided to a teammate after practice. She's just some girl. How did she make me feel like such a coward?" "Maybe," his friend replied, "because you were acting like one." The words stung because they were true. Tyler had built his identity around being the strong one, the intimidating one, the one who could make others back down. Hannah had revealed that foundation to be completely hollow 3 weeks after the hallway confrontation. Northwood High was a different place entirely. The change was subtle but pervasive. Students walked with different postures. Conversations carried different tones. The underlying current of fear that had defined the school's social ecosystem for years had been replaced by something healthier, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of accountability. Hannah found herself at the center of this transformation, though she had never sought such a role. Students approached her not for protection, but for advice. How do you stand up to someone without becoming like them? How do you find courage when you're scared? How do you know when enough is enough? "I don't have all the answers," she told. A freshman girl who had asked for help dealing with a group of older students who had been harassing her. "But I know that you have more power than you think you do." Emily watched these interactions with growing admiration. "You're becoming a leader," she observed one afternoon as they walked to the library together. "I'm just trying to help people find their own strength," Hannah replied. "That's what my father taught me, that real power isn't about dominating others. It's about refusing to be dominated." The conversation was interrupted by an unexpected voice. "Hannah, can I talk to you for a minute?" They turned to find Megan Harris standing a few feet away, her expression a mixture of shame and desperate hope. Emily looked between them, sensing the tension. "I'll wait for you inside," she said tactfully, leaving Hannah and Megan alone. "I know you probably don't want to hear this," Megan began, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I need to apologize. For everything, for the rocks, for the harassment, for being a coward." Hannah studied her for a long moment. "You threw rocks at me, Megan. You participated in something that could have seriously hurt me." "I know." Tears were forming in Megan's eyes. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I was so scared of becoming a target that I became part of the problem instead. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I can't live with it anymore. Because what you did standing up, fighting back, it made me realize what I'd become. And I don't want to be that person anymore." Hannah felt a familiar echo of her father's voice. "The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, but it's the tempering that makes it unbreakable." "I can't just forgive you," Hannah said finally. "Not yet, but I can appreciate that you're trying to change." Megan nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand. I just ... I wanted you to know that I'm sorry." As Megan walked away, Hannah realized that this was perhaps the most important victory of all, not the defeat of her enemies, but their transformation into something better. Tyler's transformation was slower and more painful. His attempt to apologize came in the form of a gesture rather than words. Hannah found him one afternoon defending a younger student from a group of bullies, using his size and reputation to protect rather than intimidate. When their eyes met across the courtyard, he offered a small nod of acknowledgement. She returned it, recognizing in that moment that redemption was possible for anyone willing to do the work. By the end of the semester, Hannah Ellis was no longer a ghost. She was a presence, not dominating, not intimidating, but undeniably real. Students knew her name, teachers sought her perspective, and administrators looked to her as an example of positive leadership. The change in her was remarkable. She spoke up in class discussions, participated in group projects, and even joined the school's peer mediation program. Her grades, which had always been good, became exceptional as she engaged more fully with her education. "You know," Mr. Hayes said as he handed back her latest essay, "I think you've found your voice." Hannah smiled, looking down at the A+ mark. At the top of the page, "I think I've found more than that." The essay was about resilience, about the difference between surviving and thriving, about the moment when someone chooses to stop being a victim and starts being a victor. It was deeply personal and universally applicable, the kind of writing that came from lived experience rather than academic theory. Emily had become her closest friend and ally, but Hannah had also formed connections with other students who had been inspired by her example. Rachel Simmons had emerged as a surprisingly effective advocate for bullying prevention. Even some of the teachers had begun implementing new policies designed to address harassment more effectively. The peer mediation program had become Hannah's primary vehicle for helping others. She worked with students who were struggling with conflict, teaching them de-escalation techniques and helping them find their own sources of strength. "It's not about fighting," she would tell them. "It's about refusing to be powerless. Sometimes that means walking away. Sometimes it means standing your ground. The key is making sure the choice is yours." Samantha's story had taken a different trajectory. Her suspension had been followed by a mandatory transfer to a different school, the consequence of the administration's new zero-tolerance policy toward harassment. But even that had led to unexpected growth. Removed from her position of power, forced to confront the reality of her actions, Samantha had begun the difficult work of examining who she was beneath the carefully constructed persona. It would be a long journey, but it was a journey that had finally begun. "I heard from her," Megan told Hannah one day. "Samantha, she's getting help, real help, therapy and stuff." Hannah nodded. "Good, everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were, even her, especially her. Hurt people, but healed people can heal people too." As spring arrived at Northwood High, Hannah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. The quiet girl who had entered the school, determined to remain invisible, had become someone who couldn't be ignored, not because she demanded attention, but because she had learned to inhabit her own power with grace and responsibility. On the last day of school, Hannah stood in the same courtyard where her transformation had begun. The equipment shed looked smaller somehow, less menacing. The concrete where she had bled seemed ordinary, just part of the landscape rather than the site of a pivotal moment. Emily found her there, 2 graduation caps in her hands, even though they were only finishing their sophomore year. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked, settling beside her on the bench. "Change," Hannah replied. "How it happens. How fast it can happen when you finally decide to stop accepting the unacceptable. You changed more than just yourself, you." "No." Hannah looked around the courtyard, then back toward the school building. "We all changed. That's the thing about courage, it's contagious. When one person stands up, it makes it easier for others to stand up too. So what's next?" Hannah smiled, thinking about the summer ahead, about her junior year, about the students who would need guidance and the conflicts that would need resolution. More of the same, I suppose. Helping people find their strength, making sure nobody has to face their bullies alone. And if new bullies show up? Hannah's smile took on a familiar edge, the one that had once terrified Tyler and Samantha. Then they'll learn what the others learned, that actions have consequences, that victims can become victors, that the quiet ones are sometimes the most dangerous ones of all. As they walked back toward the school building, Hannah caught sight of her reflection in a window. The girl looking back at her was still recognizably the same person who had entered Northwood High as a ghost. But there was something different in her eyes now, a confidence that couldn't be shaken, a strength that couldn't be broken. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer a victim. She was Hannah Ellis, and she was exactly who she was meant to be. The bullies had indeed messed with the wrong girl. But more importantly, They had inadvertently helped her become the right girl, the one who could stand up not just for herself, but for everyone who needed someone to stand with them. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. One final time. Control is a precision instrument. You apply the right amount of force at the exact right moment, and you can change everything. Hannah had learned that lesson well. She had applied exactly the right amount of force at exactly the right moment, and she had changed everything. Quiet storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by its power. And in that transformation, Hannah Ellis had found not just her strength, but her purpose. The ghost had become a guardian. The victim had become a victor. And Northwood High would never be the same. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.